Well, hello and welcome to Worldwide Technology Presents Research. I'm your host, Rob Boyd. Imagine writing a security policy once and having it enforced everywhere seamlessly. It's a dream that we've all thought of because we know that it contrasts with what we've grown into, right? Which is just stacks of security technologies that we are integrating ourselves through our swivel chair approach, or however you want to put it. And as it's been told to me by multiple customers as late as last week in various forms, we don't have time to manage our management tools. You shouldn't have to. But the answer lies in a high level of integration, right? Similar to what we've been promised perhaps with Secure Access Service Edge, SASE, or its network-less counterpart, Secure Services Edge, SSE. These solutions have gained a lot of popularity, but as today's guest will point out, they lack the management cohesion that we needed then and desperately require today. Well, SSE sits at number 3 on Worldwide Technology's 2024 Network Priority List. And SSE or SASE, whichever one, we use them somewhat interchangeably. Just understand that they are frameworks, not products. These are integrated bundles of security technologies designed for an increasingly disaggregated world where we're just vaulting between extremes of work from home on one side and whose cloud is it anyway on the other. Well, today's expert guest, Nicole Portell, explains how, despite years of vendor chatter, real integration has continued to disappoint. And I was ready to chalk this up to yet another side effect of marketing hype versus reality. Not the first, certainly won't be the last, but listen in as Nikki patiently addresses my skepticism and explains the reality behind what is called unified SASE. It's a great conversation with Nicole Portell. It's next on Worldwide Technology Presents Research. You've been with Worldwide Technology for a little while. Do you mind telling us who you are, what you do, and how it fits in with today's topic?
Sure. I'm Nicole Portell. I'm a technical solutions engineer on the Secure Edge to Cloud team. We work with technologies such as SD-WAN, SASE, SSE, and multi-cloud networking. Our group works within the Global Solutions and Architecture group, so we talk to people all over the world about their business cases and how we can help.
So you're dealing with customers a lot. Do you work with the sales teams? Would they engage you as a specialist in your edge to cloud area?
Yeah, we work with pre-sales to help kind of drive the conversation around, okay, so these are the use cases that you're coming to us with. You know, here are some of the things that we're seeing in the market because we have that experience with other customers. We have that experience through testing that we do in the ATC and our relationship with with our vendors and our OEMs. So we can kind of have those deeper conversations with them about how they can best utilize technology to solve their business problems.
You know, I feel like when this first came up on the production calendar, we're talking about Network Priority 3 for 2024 around SSE, which, although I've talked about it multiple times, I hadn't actually talked about it in probably at least a year and really thought about it. And I kind of felt like, but this is my odd view of the world, that maybe it was a bit more mainstreamed than it is. Can you explain what SSE stands for, how it relates to SASE, and kind of, we'll use that as a launch point maybe into why this priority is still a priority.
Sure. So SASE is Secure Access Service Edge. We're looking at secure optical connectivity from the edge of your network to anywhere that your applications or your users reside. SSE is kind of the software security stack that's in the cloud that is part of a full SASE architecture. The other half of SASE being that access piece, which is the SD-WAN or whatever other kind of connectivity you're using.
Before we go into those, let me just drill one step deeper into something that I think most of our audience is going to be familiar with, but let's just level set. What is this architecture when we talk about SASE and SSE, no matter how they're necessarily used? How does that contrast with maybe traditional network architecture in terms of why it came about and why it's still considered something worth figuring out, for each individual operation moving forward?
Yeah, so SASE was first coined in 2019 by Gartner. So it has been around, like you said, for a little while. It's something that our customers are more familiar with as the years have gone by, where, that traditional network where your data center was the center of your universe, right? And everything, all of our users were on premises, all of our applications were in the data center. So it made a whole lot of sense to make that data center where you put your security. Because even if you're going out to the internet, you had to go through the data center anyway. So it was fine. The issue that we've had in modern architecture, obviously, we've had three big shifts. We've had the change of users from working in the office to working, like me, from home, or that hybrid environment where they're working from home and at the office and looking for experience that's going to be the same no matter where they're at. You have the second thing, which is applications moving out of the data center into the cloud. That's not going to happen for every application, but almost every organization we speak to has at least some cloud presence, whether it's like Office 365 or Salesforce or those big applications. And then the third thing being that now attackers are everywhere. We're seeing that insider threat being something that companies are more concerned about now than they used to be. So we don't want to just have a perimeter around our data center. We need to have a perimeter around everything.
Security by its nature, I feel like, is always reactive. It has to respond quickly to changes. We've got the economic benefits of a reliable internet-based transport. We know we can do that securely through encryption and various things. But now we're also saying, well, wait, everything we've ever done in routing was always about, well, what's the shortest path or what are the right economics for getting to this? And those decisions now have become a user by user basis because it's trying to say, well, this user is working with the Microsoft cloud, and there's a presence in that cloud that's geographically close to that user, but the data center may be completely somewhere else. And so it makes zero sense to try and do all that. So to do it securely, you're going to have to wrap security around it. That's where SSE started, and SSE being a framework of multiple components, yeah?
Yes, SSE is not just a single technology. It is a full stack of technologies, which is why the conversation is always more complicated when we talk to customers. We would love to, just be able to say, yeah, after an hour of conversation, yes, this is the right one for you. But it is a much more complicated conversation. And we do have over 100 metrics that we use when we are evaluating an SSE. So it is something that I think our team can help bring a lot of value to the conversation to say, like, these are the things that these guys are good at. These are the things that you want to consider. What's important to you? Because for everyone, those things are going to be a little bit different.
And as someone who grew up doing security, for 2 decades at least now, in various forms, not as much as I used to, but I also feel like SSE is just security. It's like, it's another word for doing whatever is appropriate security for your risk. Mm-hmm. And in today's technological architecture, the way in which we deploy today's architecture, which is very cloud-based and very disaggregated, security has to kind of follow that model. But at the end of the day, collectively, since SSE is a collective term, it feels like we could just say security. So I don't know, is there a distinction that's important to be aware of to say SSE instead of just doing security? Is that a silly thing to even try and figure out?
No, I think it's good. I think it's a good, important thing to talk about because we do already have security, right? We have point solutions that are solving a lot of these problems. But the issue with point solutions is one, overlap, right? If you have tools that do the same thing, but you're paying for both of them, that's not great. And then you also have issues with holes in security. When you have multiple tools that you're having to manage and keep up to date, then you can have issues with having those holes in security that can get taken advantage of. So having SSE where everything is in one place, you only have one management portal for it, it's been very valuable. And I think we're seeing customers recognizing that value now as SSE has been out for a while. Last year, I think Gartner said it was a $7.11 billion business. And by 2032, they're saying it's going to be a $42 billion business. So it is growing exponentially as customers are seeing the value of it.
There's a reality, I feel like, as we've already acknowledged that we've been talking about SSE and SASE for a few years now, but there's been a reality in the implementation of these things because I used to think of, well, it felt natural. There were certain vendors I would go to for maybe, I don't know if this is on the next generation firewall or a CASB solution or some type of DLP or something, but then I'd pick someone different for each one, and then it was up to me to kind of make those work in the background. But I felt like maybe that's my best of breed approach. And I felt like when SASE and SSE as well kind of came along, it was like, well, we can do all this together. And so certain vendors would kind of package them together. Mm-hmm. Or not. It felt like we have we ever really gotten away from the swivel chair approach to integrating things? It feels like there's still quite a bit of human involved in these things.
There is, and I think that's where SASE is continually improving. This technology is very fast-paced. We're always updating our research and insights because they're constantly adding more and more features and capabilities. But one of the things that we're seeing coming kind of down the line from a lot of vendors is more of a unified approach to SASE. So taking that network piece and that security piece, and instead of having them separate in separate portals where, like, for example, policy, like you said, you would have to do policy here and you would have to do policy here. So for Nikki, who works hybrid, if I had to have a policy for DLP, it has to be put into the SD-WAN piece, right, for when I work from the office, but it also has to be put in the SSE piece for when I work over here. And so that, that multiple policy, that having to keep everything separate that way, those two pieces not talking to each other, has been something that we've seen as an issue, not just with multi-vendor approaches, but even single vendor, because a lot of SASEs are created through acquisition. So companies have an SD-WAN and they acquire an SSE, and they don't necessarily speak to each other very well. What we're seeing now is that integration becoming more popular.
And this is probably a reflection of the fact that I worked for one of those big vendors that is classic for always going to market with one vendor approach, and through acquisitions and through R&D and such over time, theoretically, all those things can be offered. But it realistically could be a mixed bag on the back end on how well those were integrated and they worked. But just even pausing on that before, I always think about, what is that like to be in that swivel chair? Because I may have a policy that says Nikki is an employee with this level of responsibility, has access to these applications, works maybe these days in this part of the world. But translating that simple little profile of you into, well, what does that mean for DLP versus how does that translate to something else? That's a lot to ask, I feel like. And it just seems very, very ripe for errors to be made. And thus you're not really getting out what you've invested in. Fair?
Right. Yeah, the implementation of SASE can be challenging, which is, I think, one of the things that we are really good at helping with. We do help with that education side, but we also help with that consultative approach of, how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to make sure that you're getting everything you can out of the product that you just spent a lot of money on, right? We want to make sure that they have a timeline that works for them so that they have the least amount of downtime as possible. And so we can help with that side of SASE as well.
I want to turn back to what you said earlier, unified SASE, because at first, now I'm a little bit, my back gets up because I've heard the word unified used in so many different ways over the years, and we've run out of words, just in the same way we ran out of acronyms a while back. But unified SASE is an actual thing, and it's a useful distinction. It's starting to sound like for saying, should I search on unified SASE to even just to get a general idea of what vendors are saying that they offer this? And then, of course, turning to worldwide technology to kind of get the lowdown on, well, what's real about this unified SASE? What is unified SASE, and how does it do things differently? And can we really think of it differently than how we've been viewing SASE and SSE historically?
Right. So I think what makes unified SASE a differentiator in the market is that we're now unifying that control plane, that policy, so that we have a single place as a manager of a security solution. I think it's really, really cool that you can have a single portal and you make all of those decisions, you create those policies in there, and then you have these two pieces of your very important network working together. I kind of liken it to like two teams in a company. If they're collaborating on a project, you want them to be able to have maybe, like a Microsoft product where they can collaborate on, a Word document together, right? Or you want them to be able to have a single manager that is looking over the entire project instead of having two managers who are trying to communicate to each other, playing telephone with each other. So it's kind of the same thing, right? You have these two separate parts of SASE. You have the networking side and you have the security side, and now they can actually talk to each other for the first time. It's a lot of the same benefits as you would have, in any two teams who are collaborating more effectively together.
Yeah, because you're reducing the number of variables or points that have to kind of be brought into at any given level. And I think that's good because, at the end of the day, I think this flies really well towards something I've always believed, which is I feel like only people that like security are security people. The rest of us need security, but we certainly don't want to become, security is best when it's working and it's invisible. But unfortunately, a lot of times people then equate lack of issues or awareness of issues with being secure, and nothing could be further from the truth, because that's not how people's motivations work. So I like the idea of collapsing things together to make it easier to collaborate, to reduce the number of points that you have to understand. But one thing we haven't brought up, and I'm curious how it's affecting this, but boy, the big thing we're all talking about on every other subject these days is AI. How has AI affected capabilities of SSE, or has it? And, kind of what's something we should be looking out for there?
I think it's interesting that SSE uses AI as kind of a watcher over the entire network. So you kind of we've always had, kind of a bouncer at the door, right, of our network as our security. But what we have now with SSE is kind of like a roving security guard inside of our network who's watching out for suspicious activity. We're looking at user data analytics that are being processed with AI so that if something changes in your session, something happens that looks suspicious, the AI and your SSE has the opportunity to, one, let your team know right away that it looks off, and two, they can actually switch that session off immediately, greatly reducing risk to your network.
Well, LLMs have drawn us right back into this whole feeling of, wow, technology can feel so magical at sometimes. Right. And it's LLMs specifically, because AI has been around a lot longer than LLMs. The first thing I thought of is the notion of writing security policies or translating them correctly, and just the excitement of being able to use plain language for coding, and having that interpreted, from my experience, consistently pretty well. And these are early days. And so I have high hopes for how this could make it easier both for us to receive information as well as input information and let the system take care of itself. But so I'm excited about where that's going.
It's very cool. It's very, very new, just like all AI is right now. We're all just playing on how to implement it, right, in all of our businesses and so many business cases. But it's interesting to see, it being used to make security better, as we are also worried about it making security harder.
Boy, that's been the hardest question. But as I look at, there's been a lot of keynotes from major vendors over the last weeks leading up to the point where we recorded this, and by the time people are watching this, there will have been quite a few other big ones. I think we've already acknowledged very quickly that AI is driving a lot of our concern from a security perspective, but it's also part of the answer. And so no matter what you think or where you want to go, AI is going to be a part of it that has to be acknowledged and addressed. And it's certainly affecting our risk equations. And it feels like, unfortunately, it's picked up the speed of change to where if you were frantic before, oh my God, it feels very frantic now. And it's hard to slow down. And you guys are really good at slowing down and saying, let's understand what really is a point here. But you're also consistent about saying you do need to make a decision, not just about AI, but about a lot of security things as the environment continues to change. Risks were talked about. Oh, go ahead. You're going to comment on that?
Oh, no, I would say that I think that's a huge driver for a lot of our customers, is that, that security piece. We have customers who come in looking specifically for security as the first part of their entry into SASE. And that AI piece is a big reason for that. There's always going to be a new technology we're always worried about, right? But having something like this where you can come to us and we can talk to you about what we're seeing in many different verticals all over the world, how people are handling it, what we're talking to them about, what they're worried about, how they can test these different solutions to see what's going to be best for them. I think it's very valuable. I think we're seeing that. We have a lot of engagement in SSE right now.
What are the risks of, say, not doing SSE? We always cover the risks of not adopting, but I also feel like that implies that everybody should be adopting it. And I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. What is the risk of maybe not paying attention to what SSE could be or should be doing for you?
So I think the risk that you have when you're looking at continuing with that point solution or continuing with that data center being the center of your universe is you're risking kind of getting left behind in a lot of ways as attacks become more complicated, as they become smarter because of AI. We're going to have more and more need for smarter security and security that's dynamic. I think that's what makes cloud so interesting to people, makes them want to go to cloud is that it is something that you can scale up and scale down as you need. You can turn on and off different pieces of SSE at a time, so you don't have to adopt the whole thing at one time if it feels like a big pull to do it all at once. And that's something that we try and help with as well, is that implementation piece.
Surely there's not customers who have kind of torn down MPLS circuits and gone to internet-based connectivity without addressing the security impact of that, or are they using internet-based connectivity to simply trombone back through the data center again, but not using the standard nailed-up circuits that they have in the past because they see economic benefits from that? But then they're not. But then I think the risk is, well, gosh, you're really denying yourself the flexibility of your investments.
And you're losing a lot of things like visibility into your network. You're getting a lot of more latency, which means you're losing productivity. These are things that affect the bottom line eventually anyway, right? So it's something we want to talk to customers about, the benefits of going to SSE. Their financial, their security, their user experience is a huge one too.
You guys must see a ton of vendors. I feel like I see a lot, but they're not reaching out to me on a consistent basis. I would imagine they're knocking on your door because your endorsement would be a goldmine for so many companies. But you guys are choosy and you're very pragmatic about how you choose to partner, how to recommend, and you don't do that willy-nilly, so to speak. Can you explain how you guys are evaluating and how we should look at SSE vendors in the market?
Yeah, so we have, our team specifically works with a lot of OEM partners to talk about, their different capabilities, where they're at today, their roadmaps. We test them, like we talked about, we have 100 different metrics that we test in the ATC for each of these solutions. And what we can bring to the customer then through kind of a workshop environment is we can go through each of those capabilities one by one, talk to them about why that capability might be important to them, and then let the customer then rate their interest in that capability. Is it something that's critical to their infrastructure? Is it something that we don't care about that? We don't do that. It's okay. And then being able to take those metrics together and say, okay, well then for you specifically and your needs, these couple OEMs are going to be the best fit for you. That. And then they can take those further if they want to. And what we recommend is take it into the lab where we build a virtual recreation of their environment. These OEMs then come in and build their SSE in the environment, and then they can watch and see as those OEMs are then tested one by one through all of those capabilities so that they can prove themselves out that they can do what we said that they could do. And then we can help with testing after that for them to be able to go in themselves and try them out, because a lot of this is, how it feels, right? This is a management portal, so you want your managers to be happy with the way it's laid out, with how different functions work within the portal, so they get stick time with it too, which is really cool.
Big companies, at least the good ones I know, would always have like an environment, because these aren't cheap to do, where they would replicate their network and they had a burn-in process or kind of a testing process for applications to kind of be introduced into production and things like this. But that's really a luxury. You guys have kind of created that with the ATC, and you do that on behalf of a lot of customers. So not only for your own internal, do we even want to work with these people kind of thing, but it's the interaction among multiple vendors where the rubber meets the road that's always inevitably so painful for customers. You guys, I guess what you're speaking to is proof of concept. Is that correct? And is that something you recommend for deploying these solutions in a fair manner?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, these are such complicated solutions that having a proof of concept first is really, really important. And I think what's great about having that conversation first, that workshop where we narrow down your choices, is that one, we're narrowing down the number of ones we have to test, right? Because it can be cost prohibitive to test 6, 7, 8 OEMs in the lab, right? And take months and months and months of work. If we narrow it down to 1 or 2 based on what you need, then that's great. We can narrow down the capabilities that we need to test, right? If it's a capability you don't care about, then we don't need to test it. So having those conversations ahead of time just makes the process so much easier, so much faster. We get them to the answer that they need as quickly as possible.
And I assume it's possible to migrate into this. It's not a hard cut, right? To kind of start adopting these technologies and roll them out if I've got multiple. What do you recommend in terms of how to transition into these technologies, assuming you're on something that's more traditionally based?
We had a global fight came to us with over 50,000 employees. They were looking for education. They didn't really know a lot about SSE at the time or SASE, but they were looking for a VPN replacement, which is often a very common way that customers kind of come to us. They're looking for
Got a narrow
specific
thing they want to do.
want to do, right? So then but through conversation, we got to talk to them about how much more that they could do through SSE. This became like a full tool rationalization discussion. They were very excited to have better visibility because their DLP was being handled by multiple vendors. So they had to look in multiple places to be able to get the information that they needed from anything. So we did the OEM evaluation workshop with them. We narrowed it down from 6 OEMs to 3. They took those into the lab and then were able to make a final decision. Then we were able to do a pilot in production for them and then help them with the rollout as well. But then there's other ways you can do it too. We had a biopharma that came to us. They already knew what SASE was. They actually had a vendor picked out for SSE when they came to us. So it was much more of a consultative approach of like,
what were they coming to you for? Why were they coming to you? If
so
they already had it figured out. Yeah.
They wanted to test it. They wanted to make sure that they were making the right decision. So it was kind of a validation test more than exploring the entire market landscape. They were originally looking for a solution for hybrid work. We did talk to them about facility as a hotspot because they had these like roaming pharmacies that they needed just connectivity through the internet with security, and they didn't need SD-WAN on them. So facility as a hotspot is a very common use case for us as well. After that, it was more about helping them understand the licensing and financial part of the process because, like you said, you can turn on different pieces of SASE at a time, but that's usually something that's tied to licensing. So we can help them understand, like, this is the level of licensing you need to do the capabilities that you're saying you want to do. But so we ended up doing a full business analysis of their entire security infrastructure from that beginning conversation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And I assume they came out with hopefully a better direction. Did they change their SSE vendor based on everything been through so far?
No, they were able to stay with the one they wanted. Okay. But we were able to kind of talk to them about what was available in the market a little bit too, just so they had a better idea and they could feel more confident in their decision.
You mentioned tools rationalization, which was the word I couldn't come into my head earlier, because you talked about workshops, and that was one of the things, it was years ago, I believe, when talking about that specific workshop, because I think there was a workshop with that name. But I love the idea because I feel like there's always been a frustration. First, I used to always feel for customers, and this is kind of showing my age, when we had data sheets, and you had a data sheet that would talk about what our product can do. And if I got one from this company, one from this company, and I read these things, and boy, they both sound great. What I can't tell is what's not happening or where they overlap, because this one's really good at this thing, but it also does these other things. Is that good enough? And am I even aware of it and able to take advantage of it? The tools rationalization to me is just genius for saying, hey, you may not need to buy new things. You may not need to throw everything out or change, and we're not just looking for creative ways to try and sell you new hardware or software. What do you generally recommend? So as soon as we wrap things up here, I'm just kind of curious about next steps and where someone goes in terms of how you advise them. Because let's say you're advising us and you're like, they're interested and they're like, I want to pursue this, but I feel like there's so much more I need to learn. Are there some logical steps to take? Is it working with you more, or are there more prescribed solutions using your team?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to reach out to us and our team, we are so excited to work with customers about this. So anytime, give us a call. Yeah. We're really excited. But also, we have so much on the platform already as far as, articles. They can read videos like this one. They can do, our ATC has labs that are just, you can open it up and go in and see how, Cisco and Zscaler work together. Or, there's so many different options on there. For SSE labs, or you can get hands on keyboard and see what it feels like.
I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think we forget. I always think of the ATC as this beautiful, incredibly flexible, powerful facility in St. Louis, but you do not have to go, and a lot of people don't. There's so many resources that are made available, because you guys were doing that well before the pandemic. In terms of giving people, as you mentioned earlier, stick time. I just want to see what the application looks like. I want to play with it, maybe run through some prescribed things that, because I know some of your stuff has really nice labs that I could just follow along by myself and walk away a lot smarter. And that's just a great relationship. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes, that's a great way to start. It's a really great way to start. As you come to us, understanding your use cases, we've talked about hybrid work, we've talked about facility as a hotspot, cloud application. There's so many different ways into this.
Yeah.
And then ZTNA is actually, Zero Trust is also a big one that customers come to us just asking, like, how do I do Zero Trust? And we have a full briefing just about Zero Trust. So they can come to us for that too.
Yeah, I think Zero Trust is where we really have to go. Everyone, it's not simple. It's an interesting transition. But any final words on what's most important to remember? Anything you want to make sure that we leave and not forget?
I think it's really important to remember that we have SSE as a priority because it is something that customers are really, really interested in. They are seeing the benefits of it through their use cases and also for like business priorities. So it's whether it's security or networking, we touch a lot of different teams. I think that's one of the benefits of our team is that we do bring network and security teams together from lots of different companies that don't normally speak to each other very, very much. So having those just coming together and having those conversations can be really beneficial as well. So yeah, just we would love to have you guys, come meet with us and we can talk to you some more about your personal journey into SASE and how we can best do that.
That's awesome. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I cannot overstate the value of having a worldwide technology caliber of organization alongside you in this kind of a journey. This is such a dynamic environment where so many vendors are making so many bold claims, and a lot of them are legit, right? They really can do something in certain places. And it's easy to get caught up trying to figure out what combination of vendors or services or pre-owned technology, or do you have the right people and staffing? It's a mess, and it all requires time, probably time that you do not have. I want you to start by checking out today's source of truth. Don't forget, we covered number 3 today. It's Worldwide Technology's 2024 Network Priorities Report. And notice the follow button here. You can follow all the technologies you're interested in, all the topics you're interested in. Let WWT help keep you up to date, not only with the shows that we're doing, but all the other content that they continue to put out, as well as how you engage with them with the labs and everything else. All of that is done through the platform, and I encourage you to get involved with it. It's the only way to stay on top of this crazy world we found ourselves in. It's such an exciting time to be in network technology, and all the related progress and the excitement we're seeing now, it's legit. It's changing fast, and we've got to keep up with it to succeed. My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you on the next Worldwide Technology Presents Research.